Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be the first speaker. So, thank you very much.
So I think we can play the video already.
Let's talk about typography. Let's talk about typographic experimentation, new creatures, and their uses, especially on editorial design. The ambivalence of the letter, its dual nature, it's a fertile ground for reflection. Starting from the typography fact of the letter as a reality, it is possible to undertake countless intellectual journeys to destinations that have hardly been traveled, or to try and show what is already known in the lights. And also, of course, with letters as an excuse, one can travel the world in a, let's say, conventional way. Be that as it may, letters taken in all their breadth, that is, as tool of written communication, and also as visual objects of high aesthetic and emotional power, are essential elements in the life of all of us. First of all, I would like to talk about typographic experimentation. Little by little, we are learning more and more about how the human brain works. One of the most interesting things we have learned about it is that emotions play a much more important role than previously thought. The so-called emotional brain is responsible for a large majority of the decisions we make through our lives. Emotions exert a powerful influence on our rational part, if it is even possible to separate them clearly. Where does the rational begin and the emotional end? We could draw a parallel with the dual nature of the letter. Where does its emotional part begin and its functional part end? Is it possible to separate them? Will it make sense to do so? We know, or think we know, the typography rules of usability, legibility, and readability. After many years of internalizing these rules and applying them correctly, I reached a point where everything I was doing was right, but not exciting, thrilling. So I wanted to go further and look at typographies from another point of view, the emotional perspective. Because I thought, maybe letters whose formal expressiveness manage to transmit intense emotions are able to communicate in a clearer and more forceful way. But what is a typographic emotion? What formal characteristics does a letter have to be exciting? How much of that emotion resides intrinsically in the letter and how much in the eye of the beholder? I recognize that these are difficult questions to answer. This leads me to think that the vast majority of people use the letter but don't think about them. Many of these people probably have the idea that letters simply exist, are part of the nature, or just emerge from the ether of their computer software, as Matthew Carter once said, but they have no idea that behind the letters are people who design them. The shape of the letters are fixed in the reader's brain. No one stopped for a second to think that this conjunction of straight and curved lines is an A. We simply know that it's an A. In a concentrated reading session, for example, when reading a novel or studying, the letters disappear. We don't see letters, absorbed as we are in the messages they transmit to us. This phenomenon is produced by the absolute familiarity that exists between us, readers, and those visual artifacts with which we live so closely, even if we don't realize it. Letters surround us, help us, assist us, dissuade us, soothe us, and arouse us. It is impossible to imagine our world without them. Streets of towns and cities will be silent and hostable places where it will be extremely easy to get lost. To a large extent, our way of life is based on the familiarity established with letters and, of course, with numbers. Precisely because of this ironclad, immovable relationship, typographic design becomes an exciting and infinite reflection of the forms of these familiar graphic objects, limited by rigid conventions without which they will lose all meaning. That whole idea that the game is more of a game the more rules it is governed by. Here we come to a crucial point in my opinion. When I studied history at the university, there was a subject called paleography, which deals with writing and ancient signs and documents. It consists of pages that we hardly understand, but in which it is possible not to appreciate their enormous aesthetic beauty. I discovered that there is much more than a message there, because despite the incredible difficulties in deciphering them, I could not stop looking at them. Perhaps it's in these cases where I am not too able to recognize the sign that the dual nature of the letter becomes more evident to me. That is, its graphic beauty, purely material, detached from any other meaning. Over the years, I realized that by carefully observing a letter with a designer's surgical eye, we can witness a marvelous phenomenon, strange and beautiful. Concentrating on that static dance to which the tension between forms and counterforms give rise, the pure form of the letter suddenly emerged in all its splendor. A grapheme without a phoneme, a graphic object of incalculable beauty. In this sense, calligraphers and type designers know the quality of the forms of this ambiguous creature, without whose existence civilization, as we know, it would be not possible. What if the letters themselves become the message? Their millenary familiarity has perhaps turned them to the vast majority of people into a decoration, a prop, a merely functional artifice that threads message after message from screens, pages, and urban signs. However, the letters are not only limited to being the vehicle of the message, but have the power to become the message themselves. We can try to strip the letter of meaning, but its why will always be present, even in the most subtle way, and this is, in my opinion, its greatness and its beauty. The letter, transfigured into a graphic visual object, invites us to play with its forms. Perhaps this is why I tend to relate emotions with typographic experimentation. I used to talk about the fruitful tension generated between the more established graphic design and the push of the new and experimental that comes from a place we usually call counterculture. In general, talking about counterculture in a society as fragmentary as the current one would undoubtedly be enriching, but too extensive and complex to do it here now. On the creative level, where we would frame typography, it is perhaps even more complex, because since the advent of the internet and the subsequent explosion of social networks, the multitude of trends, styles, and points of view is incomprehensible. In any case, I believe that the concept of counterculture still has that non-conformist and ascendant aroma absolutely free of other time. Digital came to change everything, and it could be that nowadays it doesn't make much sense to talk about counterculture or underground if it's not in the sense of avant-garde. Fortunately, it is very clear that all those unprejudiced reactions that seems to come from the suburbs or the underground and that make up the free advance guard of what is new or what is to come haven't lost their drive and vigor. In fact, the typographic avant-garde has found in the digital universe its ideal field of operation that make itself heard with clarity. It no longer needs intermediaries, just as Instagram or Behance or TikTok profile. I call these typefaces like the new typographic creatures, raw, visually aggressive, strident designs that brazenly put the visual or aesthetic before the communicate, that is, emotion over reason. This balance of aesthetic force that feed back on each other, where borders are blurred and permeable, give rise to new typography languages. I find it striking how, on many occasions, that mainstreams and the countercultural or avant-garde change roles, because they are by no means incommunicable spaces. What one day is radically new, the next day is a central part of the mainstream landscape. It's at the forefront of fashion and it's a trendsetter. I'm a graphic designer, editorial designer, and typographer by training. And for the last few years, I have been teaching at La Gauss, a graphic design school in Malaga. As many of you know well, direct contact with a student is very enriching. During all this time as a teacher, I have observed that the desire to experiment is connatural to learning. Yes, one learns to use typography correctly, but the desire to go further is strong. I myself, as I said before, have felt that need. On the other hand, through the 5 years I've been running my blog, Rayitas Azules, focused on typography and editorial design, I've had access to mountains of independent material, magazines and fanzines of all kinds, a world that interested me deeply because I considered it the ideal space for typography and editorial experimentation. And because of my growing interest, I made the decision to embark on a quest. The first thing is to define the space, the field of research, and to determine what an independent publication is. Because surely the first thing that comes to our minds as a designers when we hear about them is a radical, daring design that hasn't come to break the rules. But in reality, this may not be the case, and it is necessary to clarify concepts. An independent publication, from the publishing point of view, is one whose finances doesn't depend on large media companies, and which therefore has complete freedom over its formal appearance and the contents to be published. But these circumstances doesn't presuppose a particular design style, and there will be independent publications that are very modest in both substance and form, and others that are not so independent, but which seem to compete with each new issue to shatter cliches, the permeable borders I mentioned a moment ago. The publishing industry has changed a lot in recent years. In fact, everything has changed since the digital revolution, but some specific sectors have been tremendously affected, and one of them is publishing. As a reflection or consequences of the social-cultural fragmentation that digital has brought about, in recent years an infinite number of thematic trends have been appearing, some of them very specific, which together with the rise of self-publishing have led to the appearance of indie magazine, here perhaps of those fanzines of decades ago, but unlike them, with finishes in many cases of the highest quality, the perfect ecosystem for typography experimentation. Once I had my eye on this magazine, as a lover not only of letter forms, but of everything that surrounds the printed pages, and of course also as a curious reader, I decided to find out by analyzing as many independent titles as I could in this typographic experimentation really exists and how deep it is. Of course, my modest research doesn't purpose academic rigor, nor does it have a totalizing ignorance. After all this kind of exploration, I must say that my conclusions have been undergoing nuances, but that little by little I can glimpse certain tendencies. In the last 5 years, I've analyzed 145 magazines between 2016 and 2021. I've analyzed typography in masthead, headers, titles, subtitles, body text, footnotes, etc. I've got general data in percentage, and I got my own conclusions. I start with the use of typography in masthead, capital letters, lowercase letters. It seems that capital letters win. Then I wanted to know which typography style is most commonly used: serif, sans serif, slab, script, handwriting, lettering, calligraphy, and the winners are sans serif. And I also wanted to know if more standard styles are used, or on the contrary, condensed styles or extensive styles. Condensed, extended, standard typefaces. So apparently condensed styles are preferred by designers. And finally, with respect to the mastheads, to analyze the most used typography resources, which according to the research are as follows: alteration of spaces, distortions, text over image, combination of styles, repetition being the most used, alteration of spaces and distortions. I did the same with body text, analyzing if serif or sans serif are more used. I'm talking about sans serif, grotesque, neo-grotesque or geometric. So it seems that serif is the winner, And if we are talking about sans serif, the use of sans serif, grotesque typefaces are the winner. I did the same with headline, capital letter, lowercase letter. Capital letter are wind, serif, sans serif, slab. Sans serif seems that sans serif win as well. I'm talking about the standard, condensed, or extended. The winners are standard. And finally, with analyzing the most used typography resources, according to the research, are alteration of space, combination of style, outline, vertical text, distortions, repetitions, and being the most used, alteration of space and outline. I've analyzed much more, but I will tell you my conclusions when I have more conclusive data. Well, it seems that with this data we can get the formula for a trendy typographic use. So, if I have to choose a typeface for masthead, it had better be capital letters, sans serif, condensed, and using alteration of spaces and distortion. And if I have to choose a typeface for body text, it had better be serif, sans, grotesque, better serif. And if I have to choose a typeface for headlines, it had better be capital letters, sans serif, outline, using alteration of spaces. Anyway, nothing can replace the designer's own criteria and project needs. By their very nature, graphic design and type design are highly dynamic disciplines. It is natural and wonderful that new trends and tendencies appear from time to time, and that there are professionals who are not afraid of risk and error. In the studio, I'm finding that there may be less experimentation in typographic use and choice that might be expected. Even so, contemporary typographic design is a constant struggle to expand itself, to find new ways of graphing a conceptual expression, to transcend convention, but without distorting its essence. What I intend to emphasize is the need for spaces where the voices of creativity finds favorable environments to expand in freedom in this crazy of time so full of fears. Typography as a space of freedom. Thank you.
That was great. I mean, yeah, I started teaching typography myself last year, and I was struggling about explaining, quantifying experiment in typography, and this is actual research. This is like amazing. So we actually have some backbone, some serious framework to talk about this. We
I
seem to
mean,
have no. Go ahead. Go
it's
ahead.
a modest research study because there are only 143 journals, most of them European. I would
Yeah.
like to have access to more material from all over the world to start investigating this.
But yeah, that's it. I mean, you have to start somewhere, and I think that's of course the beauty of any research is that as you continue, you have to fine tune and adapt to the new findings. So this first, as you say, modest step is already something in really in the right direction of something that we didn't have before. So we have this start which we already work with, and then as it gets expanded, we can provide additional insights and like refine the findings. So it's pretty great.
It started as a personal curiosity motivated
Uh-huh.
by conversation I had with my students about whether there really was as much as experimentation as there seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is to continue researching and reflecting on typography usage, on editorial design.
Now, of
I
course,
think
no,
sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I think it's healthy to experiment in typography. It strengthens knowledge. It is an intellectual exercises, and you discover the depth or that letters have on an emotional level. I think it's great.
No, definitely. And what I find interesting nowadays is that so back in the day we had this whole movement when dry rub-off lettering appeared, so that type got removed from its materiality, so it didn't have to be done in metal or wood anymore. Then suddenly there was more experimentation in letter forms, but there have been different waves, so we always went back to these really conservative letter forms. But now I have the impression that this period of time, again, the expanding possibilities of the technology with the open type and variable fonts, and then especially also with outfits like future fonts going really out there, because they are able to experiment more and then give something to the audience without it being finished. So it gives them more opportunities to test drive certain things. That we are now in a period where we see like amazing typographic experimentation, and different from the late 90s, where it was more experimenting with the technology, learning how to destroy typefaces and reassemble them like Frankenstein monsters. Now people are again focusing on letter forms and find very valid expressions that are not deconstructing but constructing a new typographic language. And this is great that you start with doing this research, because I'm going to follow that. I have one question here. Oh, okay. It's Rafael Casas. I hope I pronounced it right. I don't know where is Casas or Casas. In your research, how do you move away from the recently unendorsed Vox ATypI? I work in multilingual typeface design, and there are diverse ways to convey emotion and voice using typefaces.
So he's asking about just Latin, maybe, or
That is
multi-type.
what I don't know. Now, on a general note, Vox ATypI was unendorsed because
Vox ATypI.
it's too restrictive. There's so much.
I know. I mean, it's the first steps for me is just to clarify the basics. So I didn't talk about the Vox ATP thing about I don't know, Garaldas or grotesque, neo-grotesque or humanist, or I just want to know. I think my first idea right now is to know how much experimentation are in editorial design. I'm not thinking in in these kinds of issue right now, but maybe I think this is growing. I will think about it, because right now maybe I'm waiting for an ATypI.
Yeah, I don't know if you. Yeah, but there was the whole discussion like, do we even still need a classification system? Because beyond the classical classes, this sounds a bit weird, there's so much breadth that can't be covered and can't be categorized. Because when you see an outfit like future fonts, I'd be hard pressed to find some like 2 or 3 typefaces that belong to a similar like visual aesthetic, because it's so wild and diverse. So maybe we just there was a suggestion to just work with tags and descriptive words that you can, all right, this typeface looks like this, and not, oh, it's a grotesque or serif or whatever. I have a question from Mira Ying. I'm going to read it to you. I'm curious about the scope of independent magazines in the research. Is it region specific? Does it include publications with much less print run than famous ones like Apartamento? And what is the local indie publication scene in Spain? So it's 2 questions.
Yeah, that's interesting. As I said, most of them are from Europe. I have a editorial and typography blog, Rayitas Azules. So we used to buy a lot of independent magazines in several places. No, so most of them are from these places. A very known one. I mean, in Spain, we don't have a lot of places to buy them, so we used to buy by internet. Sometimes we are looking for this independent magazine, and sometimes we are trying to discover new material. So we just talk with the guy who is the owner of the shop, and said, okay, can you send me some trendy things? I mean, it's up to you. So, because we want to discover more, and more, no? And I use all the material I have. So I know there are more magazines over the world, and that's why I want to continue with my research, because I feel like I'm very limited with my material.
Yeah, of course, the upside of having the internet is that you can go worldwide with your research. The downside, of course, of not visiting physical spaces is that you don't have these chance encounters with something you are actually not looking for. So you're kind of at the mercy of the magazine shop owners to know, all right, this looks experimental or this is not, and sending you the right things. So actually you should apply for a grant from your university to travel the world and go to all the bookshops.
And it's funny because in Spain we had because it closed, so it's very sad. There was a store that once a month sent you a surprise magazine with your order.
That's
So
great.
we discovered a lot of independent magazines thanks to that.
That's nice. Would it be an idea to set up a network of like-minded designers or people and say, in your country, in your city, can you go to a magazine shop and you make a list public? We already have these. And then like, check and see if you find something new for us.
Yeah. But anyway, we used to buy a lot by internet.
Yeah, of course. But that's it. Internet is always, it's double, because sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for, it gets harder, because what do? Can you just say in the magazine and trust that results will be what you're looking for? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I used to say, send me independent magazine. This is the word, independent magazine.
Yeah.
But I remember when we did typography magazines, no? That it was this moment of also looking for magazines that were not in real kiosks here in Barcelona, at least. So I have a person who is Claudia Parra, who is very curious about magazines, and she collects them. And what she did for us was putting me like 300 magazines to look at through the PDFs and the websites I had. And it was really a huge amount of work, But later, because it was not so easy as now to order things online, we asked them, writing them to send them by post, because the idea was to see them, not to see them only online.
Yeah.
And it took months and months of research to do that. But I think that I find this presentation you did, Anna, as a continuation of that research, because it was also about typography magazines, and it is like a sort of a second part or continuation of something that it was finished at that point, but now, it's still a trend, a topic. We can still be talking about typography magazines forever, because...
Do you have those magazines left? I want them.
Yeah. I think magazines is a field of experimentation because are more ephemeral than books. And then people can just put the ideas on the magazines in a much easier way, because you can also change your mind in the next issue. So you can continue exploring and showing the readers your own ideas about what magazine design should be. So I think it's really great.
Yeah.
It's a great field.
As I said, I think it's a trendsetter.
Yeah, it's a trendsetter, exactly. We have a comment from Mira Jing. He says, same feeling, magazines that can appear on a kiosk usually need to go through big distributors. So for smaller publications like fanzines and less known artist books, it really depends on the taste of indie store keeper. So they work as curators in a way, you know. What they like is what they have, you know. So probably we're missing a lot of other independent magazines. To make a call.
yeah, please. No, lately I'm trying to look for fanzines. No magazines, so fanzines as well, to try to look for something new, because when I honestly I expect more experimentation when I did my research, and it was like a kind of disappointed. Is what 74 serif? What? No, I so maybe no, I don't know, because it seems that there are more experimentation according to my numbers. No, so I don't know. I will keep searching.
A few years ago, there was this kind of anti-design trend where people willfully undesigned their publications by using Times New Roman and Arial and having these empty boxes, image boxes with the cross and so on. Is this something that is still happening, or do you have the impression that this trend has gone and people are again really trying something new?
It's still happening.
It still happens? Oh my God.
There is an independent magazine who use Arial at Times New Roman.
Yeah. I once saw a presentation. It was at Typo Berlin, I think, and this one presenter was describing their work as being the next best thing to heavenly inspiration, and it was just the standard stuff. And I was wondering, is this ironic, or are they, because you sometimes have the impression that they get into a space where they say like, oh, if you don't like it, it's because you don't understand it and you're too stupid. Where I was thinking like, dude, everything's in Times New Roman and Arial. That's not really like pushing boundaries or anything.
That's why maybe the reason for instead of focus just on typography, I wanted to know more about typographic resources, because maybe it's not the typography or typefaces, maybe it's the use of them.
Yeah, of course.
So so I'm thinking a lot about that. So maybe the experimentation is not on the typefaces; it's more in the typographic resources. So that's why I started to look for the distortions.
Yeah, strictly speaking, as I teach my students, typography is not what typeface you choose, but what you do with the type. Different areas. Yes. I have a question again from Rafael Casas. How does local taste and context play a part in this scenario? How do you get to separate these formal conventions from individual tastes?
Wow.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Can you repeat?
Okay, so how does local taste and context play a part in this scenario? How do you get to separate these formal conventions from individual tastes? So I think he means you recognize these trends, you have like tabulated so many magazines use this, but then you have to wonder, is it more like there's an actual visual direction, or is it the personal taste of those people, and is it that's what I think.
Yeah, this is a tricky question because sometimes when you are reading this independent magazine, you don't know if behind that magazine there is a graphic designer or there is a person who loves this this topic, and it's like a hobby or something like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like I don't know if it's a graphic design solution or decision, or is or No, but there is a no professional person behind the magazine. So this
Somebody
is
who
the
really
first.
loves it and wants to do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, but they actually spawned the whole graphic design trend in the late 80s, early 90s, where we had the vernacular design in the USA, where they were designing, for example, Tibor Kalman and so on, that they were designing as if they were not designers, with intentional little mistakes and so on. And it does have its charm. And it's also not that you have to be a professional graphic designer to produce beautiful design. You said something about fanzines, that you want to look into fanzines.
Yeah.
I have very little experience with that, but my students have to do a little mini site where about their preferred topic, and you see that when they talk about an artist or a movie series or whatever, they specifically try to mimic the typography and style of either the album covers of the artists or the movie posters of the movies and so on. If you are going to investigate fanzines, don't you worry that the visual styles will be tainted by the fact that these people try to mimic other designer
Yeah.
styles that was invented for these things.
Yeah, I worry, but I feel like some of of my students, when I ask them for a final project for them
Mhm.
portfolio or something like that, since 2 years ago they want to make fanzines, they want to design
Yeah.
fanzines, so they are going to be professional designers, and and I trust them. So I think the for one generation, or one generation, sorry, right now is like something very new,
Mhm.
and it's like the step to work on editorial design. So I have to be careful with which fanzine you want to investigate. But maybe, I mean, I think I will capable of, see which yes and which are not, able to give me a good research or good numbers or something like that. But I feel like, fanzines are coming out again, like
Yeah.
the 17th or something like that. I don't know,
Yeah.
Laura, if you have that feeling with your students, maybe, or in Barcelona.
Yeah. I think the students are always interested in publication of their own things, and also, for instance, now in the school I teach, they have a risography machine. And when I was on Thursday with them, all of them want to print in the riso, because they have the possibility to produce by themselves their own materials, and they are also interested on that. No, but of course they are mostly trying to represent a topic on these fanzines, and I'm trying to tell them about what is the language they should use depending on the fanzine they want to design. Because for me, it looks like all fanzines look the same. It doesn't matter which is the topic of the fanzine. So I'm trying also to put them the idea that there should be a difference between fanzines, because fanzines is about photos and text and collage between photos and text, but there's also a subject. They should also think about how to represent the content in the proper way. And that's interesting because, of course, if you are all going to have this result and they are going to have the same colors, how you are different from this one, no? And I think fanzine is also something that they enjoy a lot, because I don't know your students, but my students are rediscovering the 80s, and they are really freaking out with all the layouts from the 80s, and this is something interesting because they are also coming back to use analogical techniques, not only doing design, so I really encourage them to do things in a more experimental way. But they don't know how to experiment because they are raised on the computers, so we need to teach them how to experiment. This is something that I'm also trying to solve, in a way, how to experiment with type, and trying to put them these ideas.
But I think this is the most interesting thing, because the most important thing for me is that they feel free to work and see what typefaces they use with that freedom. No, they tend to use more emotional typefaces
Yeah,
when
precisely.
they feel free. No,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not something to, I don't know, substitute for a magazine or a press or a branding or something like that. It's like fun thing, and they feel like they have more freedom, so they risk.
We have a question
more.
from, sorry, Anna, sorry. We have a question from José María Ribagorda. He makes a question in Spanish. I'm going to read it, and later I'm going to translate it into English. José María says, Ana, ¿notas en tus alumnos de editorial la influencia de la pantalla en el diseño de la página? So this will be, Ana, do you notice in your students of editorial design the influence of the screen in the page design? So meaning the influence of a screen into the paper design, probably. I think
a lot. Yeah, maybe 10%, 20% wants to try to do things with hands or more, without screens or something like that. But they, talking about typography resources, they want to use textures, distortions, effects with Photoshop, with something or motion, or they are even I remember last year one student, they used to they try to make a motion graphic. They capture some screenshots, and these screenshots about typeface, he used it for a for a masthead in a magazine. So even that, it's not modify the typeface with I don't know, Illustrator or Glyphs or whatever. Is to take a screenshot for animation of a typeface and use it as a masthead in a magazine. So I think yes.
Well, actually, it's interesting. I remember one exercise when I visited the open day of the KVK, that they were the students of graduate design, evaluation design. They were doing an exercise the opposite way, putting in paper online publication. And it was pretty interesting. It was pretty interesting because I mean the codes are different, but they can also fit in a printed page. So I think it's interesting, But now I'm more used to design on a screen, and there's almost nothing you cannot do without on a screen. I mean, so editorial design. We're also telling the students that we should take this flavor and charm of the printed page into on the screen, Or at least this is what I try, But because typography is very rich, and sometimes people think that on the screen it should be more austere and more sober, And this is why you can really put all this richness on type, But it's a nice debate. It's interesting. Interesting. We are going there.
I find it funny that you mentioned that students were using screenshots for making a masthead, but I remember not long ago when I was at the academy, what we had were the letter set catalogs, and we also put them on the photocopy machine and enlarged and cut up and so on. So actually, it's a very similar reflex that continues through time, but just changes medium.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same.
It's not all right to say like, oh, you can't do that because we did it ourselves with the photocopy machine.
I remember me scanning, with the scanner.
Yeah.
Moving typeface, maybe 20 years ago, trying to get something very, very, very cool. Yeah. I have something, maybe, it's 20 years ago, but I remember me doing that.
I did a workshop in school, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And there I taught them they had to design something, and then they had to manipulate it. And that's all I printed out. And when you put it on the photocopy machine, and when the photocopy machine goes, you move it around. And they were like, what? We never did it. They're like, that's all we did, because that's all we had. We didn't have Photoshop to like pull and pull. We had to do something else.
Liquefy.
It was pretty funny. They were like, what?
I think it's very healthy.
Yeah.
To experiment when you are a student, and also now, no? Because sometimes I feel like when I see some artwork from my students, I think, wow, I wish I had an idea myself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we learn sometimes more from our students than they learn from us when we see what they're trying out and we hadn't thought of it. we're 10 minutes out.
Yeah.
So
we should move to the hanging out room.
Yeah, we go to the hangout room. So anybody who was here and wants to continue the conversation, I suggest we all go to the hangout room so that people can get prepared for the next talk. I would say thank you, Anna. That was really a fascinating, a superb presentation. I loved it completely from beginning to end. So thank you so much for opening this last day of ATypI. And I hope we see you a little longer in the hangout room.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was so exciting.
Gracias, Ana.
Gracias.
It was super nice to have you here. So vamos a la sala de a la sala de hanging room, que no sé cómo traducirlo, de estar allá, ¿no? De quedar, a la sala de quedar.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye.